Anytime I do a presentation, I like to start with a moment of mindfulness. So if you're willing, I invite you in this moment to participate with me. I invite you to gently close your eyes. And we begin by taking a nice deep conscious breath together. And on the exhale, simply allowing yourself to become fully present, fully aware of what's happening right in this moment. Taking a few moments here to focus on the breath, consciously choosing to slow the breath down and noticing the effect that that has. And taking this moment now to move within, discovering that place within ourselves that is still, that place of inner spaciousness. Simply allowing ourselves to drop down into that place as we open up to the infinite possibilities of our time together. So we set the intention for our time together to be open and receptive, guided by inner wisdom, knowing that every word that I speak is spoken from my essential nature. And every word that you hear is received as that divine inner ear. Knowing that we have come together today by divine appointment to play in this field of infinite possibilities. So we simply take a few moments now in the silence. And then slowly beginning to bring your awareness back into this time and space. And as it feels right for you, I invite you to gently open your eyes. It's an honor to be here today, and what I'm talking about today is a return to wholeness. So what is wholeness? And is it true that we come into this world deeply connected with a sense of our own wholeness? And if it is true that we come into this world as whole and perfect spiritual beings, innately knowing our oneness with Source, what happens to that connection? What happens to that knowing? How do we separate from this essential truth? And more importantly, how do we now return to that sense of wholeness? I want to start by telling a bit of my own story. I remember coming into this world as a whole and perfect spiritual being. My mother often tells the story that when I was a young child, I was the happiest baby and toddler that she had ever experienced. What I remember is laying in my backyard on a hot summer day, mesmerized by life, in awe and wonder of a blade of grass, a butterfly, watching ants build their home, working together to create this magnificent mound that they all lived in. I remember feeling like the luckiest person alive. Open, receptive, and deeply connected with my essential truth. This sense of wholeness, this belief in my own essential beingness lasted for many years. But through a series of events, I began to forget that truth. Don Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Four Agreements, uses the term the domestication of the human. I love that term because when we domesticate an animal, we call it breaking them or breaking their spirit. That was my experience. I remember feeling so connected, so open, so filled with love. And I came into a world that was teaching me about good and bad and right and wrong, competition, violence, all the isms. I remember that being so counter to my essential truth. And through a series of events, I began to shut down. So here's a picture of me coming into this world as a whole and perfect spiritual being. Look at this beautiful baby coming into this world filled with light. My guess is that you also came into this world filled with love and light. Another story I like to tell is my mother said by the time I was 4 years old, she realized I was probably going to be gay. If you look at this picture of me as a 3-year-old, I often say to her, "What took you so long?" Because here I am at 3 years old, filled with my effervescent beingness, so enthusiastic, so deeply okay with who and what I was. But what I didn't realize at that point was I was born into a world, a time and a place where not everyone was going to celebrate that effervescent self. There were going to be people that were not okay with me being that little boy filled with enthusiasm. I quickly realized that because I was a boy, I was supposed to act in a particular way. Don't throw like a girl, don't run like a girl, don't talk like a girl. So we often don't identify some of what happens in the world as a traumatic experience. But for me, anything other than being taught you are a whole and perfect spiritual being is actually a traumatic experience. So if you think back to kindergarten, do you remember being in kindergarten? And do you remember the teacher standing in front of the room? Was that teacher saying to you, "You are whole and perfect just the way you are"? You are a perfect being filled with love and light? If you went to that kindergarten, I applaud you, and I think how wonderful that some of us got that. But for many of us, if not most of us, we're taught something counter. So by the time I was 7 years old, I began to close my heart. As a matter of fact, I have a profound memory of a moment that I was sitting at my dining room table. My mother and my 2 sisters were there. And I remember a physical sensation of closing off. It was as if there was some other entity or some other being protecting me from the world. What I recognize in retrospect is that I was doing the best I could at that moment to feel safe in a world that was not safe for me in so many ways. So in that moment, I had a physical sensation of closing down, a wall being built around my heart. And from that moment until I was 14, I walked around with this belief in my own brokenness. There's something wrong with me. The world is not safe. It's not okay to be me. I remember calling my sisters and asking them about the events of our lives. Now, I had done enough work at that point to realize that I was probably going to hear different versions of the story. What was surprising to me, though, is I heard totally different stories. I had a story that my dad was never there, that he was not loving, not present for us. Therefore, I decided that there was something fundamentally wrong with me. My younger sister, on the other hand, had a story that our dad was open and present and always available for us. Same household, different story. But more important than that, a different conclusion about ourselves and the world. So at that moment, at age 7, when my heart closed, that was a brilliant strategy because it did protect me from being hurt. It also protected me, if you will, from getting the love and connection that I so longed for. So I did walk around for those 7 years feeling broken, feeling damaged, disconnected from my true nature. So that little baby that came into this world wide open, filled with love, filled with awe, filled with wonder. Over the years, I began to separate from that truth and developed a belief in my own brokenness. So by the time I was 14, I discovered drugs and alcohol, and those drugs and alcohol actually brought relief from that sense of brokenness. When I first used drugs and alcohol, I felt like I was in the backyard again, open, in awe, deeply connected with myself again. Unfortunately, it didn't keep working that way. That was a very short-term experience. And throughout those years, from age 14 until 21, was a very, very much a low-level search for wholeness or a search for a deep connection with myself and the world. It was as if I had my umbilical cord in my hand trying to plug into someone, something, some behavior, some substance to try to feel whole again. What I recognize now is that when we separate from our essential truth, when we separate from our beingness, when we believe that we are broken in some way, we look to the world to bring us that sense of wholeness. So we might be walking around looking for love, looking for relief, looking for that sense of wholeness, of openness, of our own beingness. The issue with that is, of course, the world can't bring us that sense of wholeness. And the paradox is, it's already there. We are already whole and perfect. But because we have separated from our own wholeness, our own beingness, we end up searching outside of ourselves to try to discover something that's actually already innately who and what we are. So in my own journey, I came into recovery, ironically, just before my 21st birthday. And that began my journey of reclaiming the truth that I am a whole and perfect spiritual being. Around the age 22, I met a woman who changed my life. Her name was Mary Helen. She was a beautiful Southern woman. She was so filled with love and so filled with light. And it was her energy, her beingness, that brought so much curiosity for me. There was a resonance with her, an energetic alignment with her that created my own desire to shift from looking to the world to plugging back into my essential truth. She taught me through her kindness, through her open-heartedness, and through her example what it means to return to that sense of the truth of who and what we are. See, I thought I had to learn how to achieve something, how to get somewhere, how to do it perfectly so that I could feel whole again. She introduced me to an idea, to a concept that it was more about unlearning and returning than about moving toward a destination. So I've come to recognize that most of us come into this world and through a series of events we separate from the truth of who and what we are, and we develop these BS belief systems about ourselves. I am not good enough. I'm not worthy. I am not lovable. And when we believe these to be the truth of who and what we are, when we separate from our wholeness and start believing in our brokenness, we develop strategies to try to manage that sense of brokenness. And so many of us come into a spiritual path or come into recovery or start to work on ourselves, and we believe we have to change those core beliefs. But in my work and in my experience, what I've really come to understand is that we can simply recognize that that is not the truth of who and what we are, and that the strategies that we have developed to try to feel whole again were actually brilliant in some way. But the real journey of spirituality is a return to our wholeness. So if it's true that underneath all of our behavior, there is still a whole and perfect spiritual being, how do we return to that wholeness? For me, it's twofold. One, cultivating a relationship with that essential self through mindfulness, through authentic and intentional community. We create a space and a place where we can remember, recognize, and re-experience that essential truth of who and what we are. And the second piece to it is questioning everything. Questioning every belief that I have about myself and the world, and every strategy that I have developed to try to protect myself and manage these core false beliefs. So the spiritual journey then is one of discovering those core beliefs, discovering the strategies that we have used to manage those core false beliefs, and returning back home to our original perfection. So in closing, what I want to offer for you and to you is simply a question. What if there's no destination? What if you're already a whole and perfect being? What if you could begin to question your assumptions about yourself and your world and return to the beingness that you already are? What if you can call off the search and rest in a deeper reality, the truth of who and what you already are. So thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you so much for participating in this conversation about how we can return to our own wholeness. What I want to offer you is this. You are a whole and perfect spiritual being. You deserve a life filled with love and connection. It's already who and what you are. What if you are the one you've been waiting for? What if, rather than thinking you need someone or something in order to feel whole, and it's really about returning to your original perfection?